Okay. My name is Jacob Waterborg. I'm the president of UMKCRA. And it's my pleasure to welcome you here, both returning members, as well as a number of new retirees who already made the step of becoming a member of our Retirees Association. I also welcome Daniel McIntosh as our keynote speaker, who will talk about STEM higher education challenges. Enjoy yourself. Let's see what UMKC is doing to get STEM a big trunk.
You're supposed to do that afterwards. Thank you, Jakob. Really great to see and meet some people and see people I haven't seen in a long time. A special thanks to Saeed for inviting me to give this talk. I've been here, I'll do this talk in 3 parts, a very brief introduction of myself to kind of give some background since I came to UMKC, and then I'll get into what the challenges are and what we are trying to do to address it. This has become my passion. I didn't start off this way. I started off as an astrophysicist. That's what I was hired here at UMKC to do. But this really, I appreciate this because it gives me a chance to really bring together a lot of smaller talks I have and slides I'm working on all the time as I'm developing proposals and meeting with teams to try to bring together a coherent narrative for about 35 or 40 minutes. I love questions. Feel free to just raise your hand or interrupt. You don't have to wait to the end if you don't want to. I'm very interactive in my classes. I hope this works out. I am going to give a lot of numbers. I don't expect everyone to remember all the numbers, but there's some big picture numbers about these challenges both here at UMKC and across the nation. So just by way of introduction, slides like this are way busy. I'm not going to talk through this whole slide. This is what we made since we moved to the new School of Science and Engineering. Full professor, came here 15 years ago, hired as an astronomer. I've had leadership roles. I've developed lots of classes, worked with lots of students, had lots of grants, both in my astrophysics side, the science side, and in my passion, STEM education. Oh, and just to be clear, we are talking STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. That's that shorthand that we all seem to use for kind of all that tech stuff. So that's just an overview for our faculty retreat. We get together, everybody has to introduce themselves in a slide like this. Really brief background to like, how did I get here? How did I get to the STEM education stuff? So I came in through my astrophysical roots after graduating with a PhD from University of Arizona. I was a postdoc at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst for 7 years, where I met my wife, finished her PhD. We both came here together. And I like to consider myself, when I was doing astronomy, and some students still are, as a galaxy demographer. Basically, parts of big teams or in small groups with students, collecting lots of data from the universe, images and spectra, to figure out the populations of galaxies and therefore try to figure out something about their development. And I really like galaxies that crash into each other to make bigger galaxies and lots of fireworks happen. And I've had a very rewarding career. Been parts of huge teams. This is one of the largest Hubble Space Telescope teams ever, and I've circled here a couple students. This is a former PhD student. This is a former student I worked with as a postdoc at Massachusetts, and now is a professor of astronomy at Mizzou. I've worked with students at all different levels and all different capacities, and that's probably one of my most rewarding parts of my job. So something happened along the way. I was working, and we'll get into this slide will come up a lot. There's kind of 3 areas of STEM challenges I was working on as a young professor, and I won in 2016 the Innovative Teaching Award for UM System, which was the first time in 8 years up to that point. And that really validated some things for me that, yes, I have an impact about this, and I was doing this basically just because I thought it was worthwhile. I kind of figured out things on my own. I wasn't very aware of the education literature or what the challenges I'm going to describe to you are. But once I won that award, it just started to click, and I started learning more and more about these challenges. And so I'll sum it up that there is a wicked challenge in STEM higher education. It's universal across the United States. There's a few institutions that are doing really progressive things, but most everyone else are struggling in the same way. And it boils down to all the stakeholders have been advocating for a long time, and there's tons of evidence that we should do so, to have widespread adoption of much more student-centered and interactive teaching practices inside the classroom, outside the classroom. And that really has helped me. I figured this out from reading and learning and meeting with people. And it's basically defined now both my passion and my professional mission at this stage of my career. So after 15 years, basically the last 6 years, I came here 15 years ago, the last 6 years have been more and more in this realm. And it was hard because I've been basically bifurcating myself. And at this point I've decided it's all STEM education and very little astronomy, except I still teach and love to teach it. All right, so what I'm gonna do with the rest of the talk is I'm basically gonna talk about these challenges. Both the challenge or the need and what led to these challenges and what are the outcomes both in terms of US population, Missouri, and UMKC. And in the last part of the talk, I will talk about the different kinds of initiatives that my team and I have been working on for the last 6 or 7 years, building on the stuff that I won this award for back in 2016. All right, so there's 3 big challenges facing US STEM higher education, especially in public universities, especially the really important universities like UMKC are those public research universities. And one way to couch this is in terminology in blue from the US Department of Defense, is we need more people. They need to be agile, they need to be skilled, and they need to be representative of the population of the United States. And this need has been urgent, it's been long-lived, and very persistent. So just to get a sense of this from a couple experts, going back now a decade, President Obama had a counselor where they wrote this paper that's talking about the need that we need millions of more STEM graduates, and they cite some of the things I'm talking about. Active learning, better practices in the classroom, and they underscore a lot of the need. Almost 10 years later, in 2020, the National Science Board has their vision for the future, and I'll talk a little bit more about this as we go. But basically, they're saying we have to change what we're doing because we need to have more people in STEM, and they need to represent the nation both demographically and geographically. That's very important. So I'm going to break this down into 3 specific challenges that we have been addressing that I think are the main challenges, and they basically define those 3 parts of that diagram I showed a minute ago. The first is just the number of people that go into colleges and get degrees. Something like a half of all US students that go into college as freshmen that seek a STEM degree don't graduate with that degree, and most of them drop out of college, so they don't even get their college degree. That has ramifications across the board. Just for an example, here's from the World Economic Forum a couple years ago. They show the countries with the most STEM graduates. If you do the math, China has graduating 2 times more students per capita than the United States. And India is basically around the same as us. So just in terms of we have the CHIPS Act, we put all this money into technology. President Biden is talking about this all the time. This is an example of the need, and that losing 50% of the students that are aspirational is a problem. What does that mean if we look just at the local Midwest? This map shows, I think this is also from National Science Board. Oh, no, National Center for Education Statistics, it's National Science Foundation. So basically the punchline is, in the Midwest, Missouri and Kansas, we are in the bottom quartile of states in terms of the amount of our degrees that go to STEM students. We're in the lowest quartile. So you can see right there, quartile. So of all of our degrees that we give from our public universities, only about 20 to 28% are STEM, where the national average is something like 36%. At UMKC, what does that mean? 5 years ago, I did a study around the time I was a provost fellow, where I looked at all the outcomes in our gateway courses, and I looked at all the STEM majors. We had about 600 STEM students coming in the door every year. About 55% are first-time college freshmen, and about 45% were transfer students. Every year, those students that came in either this year or last year, the incoming group, every year there's 600 or so coming in. Every year of that 600 plus 600, 200 walk out the door. So every year in tuition loss, just for the year, not compounded if they stayed, but just walking out, they came here and then they left. $2.5 million a year back then, walking out the door. They already come here. When we get emails every year, week after week, about what's the recruitment numbers, how many people are enrolled, is it changed by a few percent? That's a big number. So that's degree attainment. The second problem is, again, they're not represented. So nationally, of all the people that get a STEM degree in the United States, a little more than a third are women. Again, going back to the National Science Board and their vision for 2030, they're saying it's really important for us to change this. So much faster increases will be needed in the science and engineering workforce to represent the US population by 2030. And they talk about needing to double the number of women involved, and they also talk about vastly increasing the number of Black and brown students. And so this is their vision for the future, that by 2030 we've created an accessible and attractive enterprise for science and engineering. I love these words. Accessible is one of my key guiding principles for all this kind of development. And this will help us have a workforce that's agile, that's skilled, and that's going to help our economic prosperity and our national security. And we need it to be closely representative of our country's demographics, all income, race, gender, geography, you name it. Let's break it down a little bit. So that's nationally. Again, Missouri, 32% of all the students that get a STEM degree in Missouri are women instead of the national 36. So we're behind there. This is just a graph from the Missouri Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development showing that. We're having the bullet right there. If you talk about race in Missouri, of all the people that get a STEM degree every year from our universities, 6% are Black. The Missouri population is 12% Black. So it's half underrepresented. And this is what's happening at UMKC. If I look at graduation rates, persistence through degrees, the technical term you hear is retention. That just means the students here in the first year, they're here in the second year. Persistence is what matters. Do they stay year after year, semester after semester on their desired degree to completing? But all the statistics you look at, graduation rates, persistence, outcomes in classes, the fraction of students that drop out of classes, 2 times worse inequitable disparities for Black brews here at UMKC. And now, what this means, so I'm talking about the production of degrees. This leads to the fact that our science and engineering workforce is also not representative of the country. So this is 2020 census data, and this is from 2015. National Science Foundation have done the counts of the breakup of our science and engineering workforce, which is a big workforce. It's about 10% of the entire labor force, 11%. So it's predominantly white, male, and Asian. That adds up to 70%. If you compare those percentages to the percent of the population, you can see that in terms of representation, science and engineers are about 50% overrepresented as white male and about more than 3 times overrepresented as Asian Americans. And if you look at women, they're almost half or 50% or twice underrepresented. So their population is over 50%, but they make up less than a third of the workforce. And then for, again, Black and brown people, we're talking about 3 times underrepresented, 3 times the population. So there's really clear inequities happening that we need to address in terms of representation. The third big challenge is that there is a skills gap. So this is actually a hard thing to pin down. There I gave you a whole bunch of numbers, and I can find the statistics for the country and for the region and for UMKC. And again, this workforce right now, 11% of the entire labor force are people with STEM degrees working in science and engineering or science and engineering related careers. Really important for our innovation, our national security. Countless reports, expert societies, national funders, all these stakeholders constantly say the same thing, though they don't give numbers, is that we have, they talk to employers in private and government STEM industries at all different levels, and they say there's a severe lack of skills among the the undergrads that get a STEM degree and go into the workforce. So the ones that make it through and get a degree and go into the workforce are vastly underskilled according to all kinds of studies. And that's a problem for our national security and for our economic prosperity. Breaking it down a little bit, hear from a couple big thinkers. Richard Miller here has won all kinds of awards. He was the president of a small engineering college, I think it's in Massachusetts, named Olin College. These 2 gentlemen Richard Miller and Freeman Habrowski here. He just retired as the president of University of Maryland in Baltimore County. They have probably produced the two kind of gold standards for kind of completely rethinking what we should be doing. Back over 10 years ago, or almost 10 years ago, I think it's 2015, he wrote this paper, and this has been widely cited, and he's had all kinds of interviews and awards. I just want to read this line here. He says in 2015, it's been more than 50 years since the engineering curriculum changed significantly. So it's in the curriculum for STEM, science, engineering, math, physics, you name it, biology, the pre-medicine, it's still largely theoretical, like very deep theoretical content knowledge to get through the classes. That's what you're mastering. And the skills, there are problem solving and critical thinking skills, but they're often kind of in more idealized cases, not very real world, not very practical. So that leads for the students just going through that education, even though they've mastered the content and they've developed some skills, they're not well prepared for the workforce or for grad school to move to a higher level. So these people are pointing out this a long time ago. 30 years ago, he started a program called the Meyerhoff Scholars Program. Very expensive and hard to replicate, but essentially he completely flipped everything on its head and had the students are cohorted from day one, and they are intensely doing hands-on research, interactive, and this is a predominantly African-American school, and the success stories are just amazing. There's countless people that graduate with undergraduate degrees from University of Maryland, Baltimore County that are now professors at MIT and places like this. So they're, the kind of things he's doing and the kind of things he was advocating for and change at Owen College are the sort of things that I've been working on at kind of a very small scale, but in trying to figure out how to do this in a big public university that has a lot of inertia and a lot of traditional practices and policies. It's hard to change, and I think they argued for just taking the whole thing and flipping on its head. I don't think that's practical or realistic. We have policies, we have structures, we have faculty belief systems, a culture around teaching, around learning about what we're hired, what's incentivized. All those things make a complete do-over at public universities not feasible, I think, in the near term. So what we're trying to do is enhance to address some of these challenges. So just a couple more things on the skills gap. There's, again, like, I could find these things all day on the internet. For instance, the World Economic Forum, every year they put out a jobs report and they talk about things like, we've interviewed thousands of employers, and these are the skills that these employers highly seek from graduates, STEM or not STEM. And if you look at this list, the ones that really only land in a traditional STEM education are some analytic thinking, maybe some technological literacy, but a lot of the so-called soft skills, we used to call them soft skills, liberal arts skills, they are actually incredibly important, but the way we teach STEM, we kind of separate that or say, well, if you're going to learn how to write, go take your writing class. We're not going to worry about that integrated within our own system. And so, and they'll point out, like, look, these are the top 10 fastest growing jobs. Almost all of them are STEM and require those kind of skills and require the kind of education we're given. There's more infographics like this talking about the need for jobs and the kind of skills we're talking about and what people are looking for. There's countless things like this. All right, so I've set up the challenge. For the rest of the talk, I want to talk about how, in my mind, if I think, this is an old metaphor that we have students that go into STEM, they kind of start at kindergarten, and they're going along a pipeline. It's just one way, and there's no other way in or out. It's actually a bad metaphor, and I don't like it anymore. It's misleading because it kind of puts it on the students. Well, just the students are just leaking out of the pipeline as we go, and it's, what are we going to do about it? We live with a 50% failure rate. The 50% of the students that want STEM, they come in our college doors, and half of them leave without a degree. We'll just accept it. I don't accept it. So it still is useful for visualizing stuff. So in my mind, there's three really key places where this attrition, this loss of students happens, and that's where we need to focus our attention, in my opinion. So one is from high school to college. almost all junior high school kids say they're aspirational to go to college. Even by the time they get to 11th or 12th grade, many students say, I want to go to college, I'm going to go to college, and then a huge bunch of them don't. And that's not just STEM, that's across the board. So that's an important attrition point. I'll make an argument that if I could invest in one thing, it would be changing the curriculum and teaching, not the curriculum, not the subject matter, but the teaching in the first 2 years. That's like where most of the loss happens once students get in. And then workforce preparation, just hand the skill development outside of the classroom or inside of the classroom that's much more practical and real world. Those are 3 key places that we're focusing on that address those 3 big challenges. All right, so bear with me. This is a bit, I like visual things. I can't help it. I make these kind of graphics to help me kind of see things as a process or a system. And so this is a graphic I developed. I gave a talk last month for the Dean Chair's Directors Meeting, and I'm going to use this and actually started to play around with it, make it a little bit better. But the way I think about all those challenges, again, to kind of a little bit more detail on these attrition points, I want to step back and say, what is a traditional pathway to this workforce? In any of these areas, you have either a bachelor's degree or you go to grad school in your master's or PhD, and you wind up in this workforce. So it's important, big chunk of the workforce. This is the traditional pathway at a university like UMKC. UMKC is there's so many universities like UMKC. This is very common, the challenges that we're talking about. So T means traditional. So even the high school kind of has, in our pipeline model, kids are already thinking they like STEM in elementary school or middle school. They get into high school, they take, people say you want to do STEM, you got to take lots of math, right? You always hear lots of math and science coursework. They have some college advising. This is basically what I'm showing in blue is the traditional educational path for any student going through this system. They all have the same thing. They all have coursework, they all have advising. In high school, they get into the first 2 years of college. There's a very intense freshman and sophomore year of lower division math and science courses, your intro physics, math, calculus, statistics, computer programming, biology, chemistry, you name it. Very intense. I've heard somebody call it the math and science death march. That's a pretty bad. And then students have academic advising. So all students have that. And then if they persist through the first 2 years, they get into the required upper division coursework and they have more advising. And then some go off to grad school. About a third go to grad school and 2/3 come over here in STEM. So that's the traditional path. And now I'm going to show kind of high level view. I'm going to reiterate some of those challenges, but kind of zero down on them. And I'm going to kind of take one at a time and talk about what we are trying to do about each one of them to try to set up role models. Oh, I forgot to say something. Let me back up. So what we're doing in these areas is we are building and testing, implementing strategies. A lot of it is already, people know this if you look into the literature, this very well measured high impact practices, just how to actually integrate and facilitate and make it happen is what I mean by build. Test means measure it. We have colleagues in the School of Education, including Eric Camburn, who's the director of the Urban Education Research Center, and Karen Chang, who's the associate director. They're working with me on different projects. They're evaluator for grants we have that we're doing this kind of work so they can measure the outcomes for the students in an unbiased way. And then the hope is to actually become a role model to scale these programs kind of in all dimensions. Like sometimes I'll have things that are happening here in the last couple of years, I could think about scaling it that way, but also scaling it across other disciplines or scaling it to other institutions. So sustaining and sustainability and scalability are kind of everything when it comes to these challenges. All right, so I talked about the traditional pathway. Now I want to talk about the challenges and how we're addressing them. So the first challenge in the normal pipeline is you have early-minded kids. If you're already early-minded, it's pretty kind of, there will be some co-curricular and sometimes somewhat exclusive, not always, but sometimes exclusive activities that are only for some students. And if they're exclusive or co-curricular, they start to cut or leave people out. So that's why I have them in red. And I'm not saying they're directly responsible for why half of all college aspirational kids leave high school, but that's part of the problem. So of all students, regardless of degree, STEM or not STEM, half that said they want to go to college don't go to college. And the students that are STEM-minded, they fall into that category as well. And some of them get lucky. Maybe they go to a good school. There's more resources. They got picked for something. Maybe they did well in classes, so teachers are paying more attention to them. But that is not optimum. And so we're addressing this. This program I ran, I'm very proud of. This is probably the reason I won that award, or one of the reasons, because I started this more than 10 years ago. At the time, I was invited when I first became a professor to be the new affiliate director for UMKC for a NASA program called the Missouri Space Grant. So just bear with me for a second. About $25 million every year is appropriated from Congress into the NASA Space Grant program, and it's basically money that's doled out to all 50 states. And every state has a consortium of institutions, universities, colleges, and some science centers and so forth. And then they divvy up the money for scholarships and fellowships and experiences for students. It's basically a big service role. There's no money for the faculty to do this work. But I was asked to be on that, and then they said, by the way, Kansas City, like St. Louis, has a very high diverse population, and NASA has targets that they need to meet for the space grant program in terms of involving underrepresented students by gender and race. We hope you're going to do things that are going to help with that. And I just had some epiphany that I was teaching this very dynamic and active introductory astronomy class. I thought, okay, I could get partnerships with high schools and invite high school kids from the urban core to take a class here at UMKC on college campus for college credit. And the cool thing about it, so we've given out 90 scholarships to 81 different students over 10 years. What I'm really proud about this program is the selection. It's only based on the students saying they're college aspirational. These are 10th and 11th grade students almost completely. There's like 10% are seniors and 10% are 9th graders. So 10th, 11th grade, come to UMKC, and they're a student on campus in a class with other students, an intro astronomy class. And we're trying to address like these things in Missouri as a role model. We're not doing so great in representation of STEM majors for gender, nor for race. The outcomes, more than 90% of those 81 students completed the course for college credits, the introductory astronomy general education class for Missouri credit, MIL 42, for those that know that. Remember, I selected them based just on their interest, like they want to go to college and they are interested in science or astronomy. Nothing about grades or academics at all. 2/3 black and brown kids, 2/3 young women, over 90% completeness rate. And compared to the other more than 1,000 UMKC students in the same classes, no difference in their grade. The median, the lowest grades, the highest grades. Some years I've had 100 students in the class, 10 bridge scholars. The top student in the class was a 10th grade kid from Lincoln Prep or Hogan Prep or something like that. Coming from 11 different high schools in the area. Lots of pictures of both mentors and students. What are the successes, I think, for Bridge to the Stars? Two things. The class is very student-centered and very interactive. The term is active learning. I'll explain what that means more. Here's a little blurb. Basically, active learning are strategies that are proven that help students engage with each other and with the content of the class, especially the more cognitively difficult places where students get stuck. Having them work together collaboratively and interactive with each other and with material is just really powerful. The second factor is we hired near-peer mentors from UMKC. So over the 10-year program, I think the number's actually 24 now, 24 different UMKC students from 9 different degree programs, not all STEM, just students that are interested, get a paid internship, and they get to help these students. And so everywhere in blue circled is a mentor. You see some are the same. Here's Jamie. Some of them were multiple years. This guy right here, Ruby, he came as a bridge scholar from Lincoln Prep, then came to UMKC to be an astro and robotics engineering major, and then he became a mentor. So that was pretty cool. So I think those are the two success factors. It's basically an early college confidence building experience, being in a very dynamic classroom and have some near-peer mentoring, and we have great success stories. Oh, and I forgot to say, where's the results? So 40% of our scholars have gone off to college for sure that we know about. Trying to get the statistics is actually hard. And more than a quarter of all of our scholars are majoring or have finished STEM degrees. There was a great one that happened last spring. I got an email from one of the students that was a couple years ago. She got a big cover story at Mizzou. She's an electrical engineer now, and a Hispanic young woman. And she was thinking, she wasn't sure she was going to go to school. And now she's doing research. She's almost going to graduate. She has all this recognition. All right, so that's dealing with the high school issues, the challenge about students, trying to basically take students that are interested, give them an early college experience that they say, aha, I can succeed at college. It's going to help them persist, not only go to college, but persist in their first year. So this, I'm going to show that the blue is traditional pathway for all students. What we're trying to do, what I'm calling enhancements to the higher education system. So bridge the stars, early college, getting them into the first year. I'm not going to talk about this, but I'm thinking about and have proposed and done pilots on some proposed enhancements. So with a group of the bridge students, we did a more kind of research training for high school kids and having them go through a whole thing that's called project-based learning curriculum, and that looks like it has real promise. I'd like to see that be expanded in a much larger way, so I'm writing proposals for that. All right, next big challenge, and this is the one I think is most important really. The curriculum and the instruction, I'm just going to say it, is discouraging, and I can cite all kinds of studies. I'll give you a good example. So what I'm talking about is the first 2 years of the STEM degree. You're going through that math and science death march. That's where almost all of the losses happen. We lose about 50% that walk in the door, they don't leave. Most of it happens in the first 2 years. This is well known, it's the same here as it is all across the United States. There was a National Academy science report about 5 years ago about physics education, physics 1 and 2, calculus-based physics for scientists and engineers. The takeaway, this is across the United States, and it was an emergency because we're not training enough high school physics teachers. The takeaway is the students coming into the physics 1 in their freshman year are all gung-ho about physics. After a year, they leave, they don't learn anything, so the pre-post test, they learn very little, and they come out not liking it at all. That was the big takeaway. So that's what I mean by discouraging. So I've been advocating for a long time, and again from the Obama administration, they're saying, we need classroom approaches that engage students in active learning to improve retention and critical thinking skills, etc. So I give this talk all the time at different kind of advocacy for the State Higher Ed Board, for KC Rising or Mid-American Regional Council. This is my line, I always say policymakers, funders, and stakeholders from every single discipline that has anything to do with STEM, including medicine, have been advocating for a long time to do this. More interactive, student-centered teaching. And just to give you some examples, here's a call to action from physics. I think that's the report I was just telling you about. Math, biology, medicine, they're all saying the same thing, and they've been saying the same thing for at least 10 years. Active learning. I'm not going to read through this. This is the second slide. There's a ton of evidence that shows very clearly that this works. So, if you have active learning in your classroom, you have a half a letter grade average increase. So that means students are 1.5 times, 50% more likely to complete that class and move on to the next class, persistence. And then there was another recent study talking about really big uptakes if you're underrepresented minority students. What do I mean by active learning?
I was really confused by the end of that last slide. It's 1.5 times more likely to fail in traditional courses.
In traditional lecture courses, yes. So sorry, that I flipped it. So you're 50% more likely to pass the class if you don't have traditional lecture.
Okay.
So they juxtaposed. They did a huge. Their punchlines are pretty. They're pretty hardcore. They said, basically, if this was a medical study and we had this kind of data, it would be unethical to continue to teach like pure lecture. Is what they say. So, if people get caught up in this, I try to advocate. I do a lot of professional development for teachers, and you get invited to go to the school of pharmacy and do a little session. And basically, I advocate for a very simple approach I think people get caught up with this and they think they have to be an education doctorate or they have to like read many papers or go through years of training. Not true. I think if you follow very simple guiding principles, which is to do the act of learning in an authentic way, which means you are promoting it to the students, and it's very, very frequent. You'll see what I mean in a second. It, by definition, is inclusive because you're having the students all interact with each other. And you're encouraging, that's it. You can take any kind of method that's interactive, as long as you follow these guiding principles, I think you're gonna be good. And I would love, there's not a single university that has tried this approach across the entire Gateway Death March curriculum. Like some institution will be like one department will do it, or a group of biology professors across 5 universities will get together and get an NSF grant and do this in one, biology 1 at 5 different institutions, but no one's done it in an integrated way. So I came up with this idea for trying to say what I mean. If you think about, I'm a scientist, so I think in graphs, so pardon me. For those of us who have taught, we probably had this experience. No matter how entertaining you are, no matter how hard you try to demonstrate, engage the students, in a traditional pure lecture approach, if you think about the start of the lectures here, the end of the lectures here, this is all the students that are following you. Hopefully at the very beginning of the lecture, they're all with you. And as you talk, you're just starting to lose them because you're building on topics and ideas, and you're hoping that you explain it well enough that when you get to the next one, they will follow and be going along with you. But in truth, something like this is happening, where you're losing more and more and more of the students' attention, understanding, and by the end, you've lost most of them. And so when I talk about frequent, I'm talking about throughout the lecture. It's like a dynamic kind of integrate. I'm doing a little mini lecture to kind of set the stage, and then I impart an activity. It'll be a question, a problem they work together, and they are very intentionally said, now it's time for you to all talk amongst yourself and work this out and think about it. We have volunteer answers. It slows things down. I spend half of my lectures doing this, but it really helps their learning a lot and their engagement. You're just helping them really engage in the learning. And so kind of ideally what's happening is you're losing them, but then you have this activity. We finally get all that interaction. We come back up to where we were, and now we can go to the next topic, and I start losing them. We have another activity, and so we're doing this kind of thing every lecture. So for instance, the Bridge to the Stars courses, they took these intro astronomy classes with me. I would do this 8, 10, 12 times every hour and 15-minute lecture. More than 200 times a semester, they're interacting with each other and with other college students, with the material, and with each other to try to understand this content. And it really helps when you look at pre-knowledge at the end of the semester, post-knowledge, grades, and so forth. And just their engagement and their attitudes about it. All right, so that is active learning across the entire Gateway. I would, if I could, one thing I would invest in, I would tell college presidents, just put money into doing that. If you raise the graduation rate by 10%, think about like that $2.5 million is walking out the door every year. I didn't even compound that. Student comes in the freshman year, if they didn't leave and they stayed another year and another year, another year, we have all that tuition. So I would definitely, I would love to see this. I've written proposals. It's tough to get people to buy in because I think they feel like it's academic freedom and kind of the traditional system has a lot of inertia kind of pushing against it. STEM faculty are late bloomers. Something like a quarter do this nationally, but they're not late bloomers, late adopters. All right, the last challenge has to do with the upskilling. So if you think about support for students that want to go to careers, we have a great career center here at UMKC, but not all students use it. Students getting experiences like research experiences, whether training in a class or getting to work with a professor or going to get an industry while they're in campus, that's, again, only a select number of students. And so things like intentional STEM workforce preparation, like a very common practice for students to go into the workforce and have the skills and experiences is to work with a faculty member on research. A third of college students at UMKC and nationally, based on national studies from the government, want faculty mentor research. Only 10% get it by the time they leave, and if you're black, it's 5%. So how can you get more students to have that kind of experience? Because it gives them, they get to really learn by doing when they're working on research. And I think this is why not having research experience or not getting into internships. I know if you combine research experiences with internships during college, it's not 50%. I'm having a very hard time getting that number, but I'm taking like what everyone's saying in the reports that we're lacking the skills, and I take that number, and I have some idea from some departments about internships in industry. I know it's something, it's probably about a third of students are getting the right skills, which would be an enhancement. So that's the last thing I want to talk about. This is a project I'm working on right now with a lot of funding. So we got a grant from the Navy a couple years ago for $750,000. And then we got another grant from the National Institutes of Standards. So basically, this approach to dealing with the skill development is to give more students really accessible, practical, hands-on research and development skills, training, and also experiences. And so this is based on a pilot I built. I essentially had lots of undergrad students wanting to do research with me, and I found that every time I would have them work with me in the summer, I would spend the whole summer teaching them to get their toolkit of research skills before they could actually do anything. Boring for them, not very good use of my time. So I built basically a course framework where they are going through asynchronous tutorials that are introducing them to skills, giving them some practice, and then they have to apply it with like maybe it's doing a data analytics thing where I give them a data set and they have to do some sort of plots, or they're using a piece of equipment or whatever. So I used this model, which was a very successful pilot. We had 50 students go through this. Their graduation rates were twice what the students that don't have research experience here at UMKCRA. Lots of them got national awards for research experiences during the summer. A lot went to grad school. So I leveraged that, got money from the Navy, and we instituted 2 years ago 4 more classes in cross-disciplines, so in these different areas. Same exact framework, but in cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, this is basically antenna technology, but also directed energy for warfare, and then drones. So the way the classes work, they're all the same. Specialized training in this particular topic, but also folded in are those important things like communication, critical thinking, data analytics. Those are the skills that the employers want. We had 40 enrolled in the spring across these 5 classes. If you break down how much time in a semester the student's spending 160 hours of work, 10 hours a week for 16 weeks, it's about 135 hours of that, and then integrated across every student. If they're in this class, whatever class they're in, they're also doing asynchronous activities with career services to help them develop their resume, job search skills. They had a cool networking event here on campus with a bunch of companies like Burns McDonald, the EPA office. So they get networking, build their resume, their cover letter, basically professional job searching skills. And so then we got a National Institutes of Standard grant, and have 3 more faculty coming in, 2 from chemistry and 1 from electrical engineering. So we'll have 8 total classes. And I just 2 days ago got a little mini grant from Space Grant to add another kind of aspect to this version that I've been doing for 10 years. And so this I'm spending most of my time lately writing proposals, and I would like to see this extend to other degree programs, but also start to have partners. All right, so just to finish up in my complicated process graph, the idea here is that you have students coming out of the degree programs, and ideally they would be doing these kind of research skills training classes or hands-on research and development skills classes at different levels, 1st, 2nd, 3rd year. The one I propose here, you can have high school kids and freshmen in the gen ed model, and that would pipeline students in here. Right now I'm just pipelining in this way, but you can imagine they take their training class in one discipline, then maybe they go and work with a lab, and we have some of those grants have money for them to work in the lab, or maybe they go to another lab, or they go to industry, but we're creating more pipelines, or not pipelines, but pathways to give them the skills and experiences that are needed to succeed in that workforce. This is busy, and it's from 6 years ago. It's basically, why should we want to do this here or anywhere? And so, you know, for instance, Kansas City, Wall Street Journal said it was one of the 7 up-and-coming tech centers for the whole United States. It was about 5 or 6 years ago. Right now, the Mid-American Regional Council has said that we're a major STEM city. The economy for the Midwest region of Kansas City is about $20 billion in STEM, engineering, data science, and life and health sciences. Hundreds of companies, some of the, like Burns McDonnell, I think is a top 10 company. And with all that possibility here, they are having to import talent. KC, KU, University, K-State, UMKCRA, KU, the small Parkville, Park College, Mizzou, all of them combined are not feeding the workforce that we have just here. So there's, being ahead geographically, the underrepresentation, that's lots of words. I'll leave that there. And I'll just say thank you for your interest, and I would be happy to answer questions. This is just some of the punchlines of the projects we're working on. So, thank you. Yes, sir.
You're talking about really overhauling the educational process here. Does the traditional 4-year frame, does it fit in that? Because, we've been talking about 4-year degrees for generations. Even though we talk about a 6-year graduation rate, that usually refers to people who take a break or change majors, that kind of thing. But can we really do all this? Is it feasible in 4 years?
That's a great question. So, overhaul, I'm purposely using the word enhancement because overhaul to me means completely turning it. Like, there are experts that have tried to do this and advocated, and where they were presidents of a small university have completely flipped on its head. And it not only has helped in all the ways that we help address all the challenges we're talking about, it is feasible even when they did their whole system flipped over, because they are having increased not just graduation rates, but on time graduation rates. So you just made a really good point. In the education research world and in the upper administration college world, academic higher education policy, the two key metrics are retention, enrollment. Retention, I said, stay here. You're here the first year, did you come fall second year? And the graduation rate is the 6-year graduation rate. That means that how many students that came in university, 4-year degree, got their degree in 6 years, and the national average is 59%. So it's a 41% failure rate. So we already have a lot of students even taking longer, and still they're not finishing, to your point. But your question is it feasible with these enhancements? And I would say yes, because we're talking about integrating, like the one I would, if I could choose anything, it would be just the active learning in those first 2 years. And so the biggest barrier I have is that the faculty, faculty are not taught in STEM how to teach. We weren't hired as knowing how to teach. We don't have to have a certificate that says we know how to teach. We are hired because we're experts in an area. And if we gave a good presentation, they think, okay, good teacher in the sense of delivering content. But the problem is just saying what's in the book or in your slides, delivering content is not sufficient. That's not the same as helping people learn and learn how to learn and how to succeed. But what happens is that because they're not taught how to teach and they went through the same system, I went through the same system, probably all of us did, where we succeeded kind of despite the system, they think you have to cover all this content. You get the book, you have to cover the whole book. And my argument is it doesn't matter if you cover the whole book, it matters how much they learn. And it takes more effort to take the book and say, okay, the book has lots of great details that's important, but what's the part, like the skeleton, that's most important? Or like another analogy I have is a Christmas tree. If you understand the Christmas tree really well without any ornaments or lights, once you have that down, then you can hang all the details on it and they actually make sense. But instead, and I taught this way when I first got here, you try to cover everything and you're just losing the students because the book has all the details, so you feel like I have to teach all the details, but that's not true. So it's feasible, but we have to rethink, like, is it important to cover so much content or to help them learn how to learn? And that's why I basically cover half the content, but I really drill down on the stuff that's most fundamental. And they're not just memorizing it, they're understanding it, they're applying it, they're doing the higher Bloom's taxonomy analysis. So having kids come in from high school and get college credit, that actually makes things faster because they have one course credit. The training classes, right now the challenge of those training classes that we have grants for is that they're electives. And so depending on the degree program, for some degrees it's hard. Engineering students, they're not allowed to take any elective until their senior year, and they basically can take one. Other majors, it's a lot different. So there are some places where it's harder. One way to change that would be if this class, this kind of course framework, we can prove that it's really working, and it's going to take years of research and doing it. Maybe it becomes part of the required curriculum. Then it would be much more feasible. Well, that's a great question. Syed, and then
how do you see this kind of thing getting to be a part of curriculum? You are making consistent effort, you're talking with people, administrators, everybody. But what is your thinking about it becoming a reality? 5 years, 10 years, or what?
that's a good question. I think that's the question that I'm thinking about constantly. So I'm going to DC and meet with some program directors from the different funding agencies. Right now, I don't have an answer, because basically, I guess the answer is build it. It's kind of like the baseball movie, Field of Dreams, build it and they will come. I've tried very hard advocating, giving talks, pointing out the numbers. I don't think that people are against it. I think they think that it's not likely. And so I think it's more like, okay, well, keep on bringing in grant money and show us how it works. And then if you can really show by doing that, not only is it work, but it's actually feasible to scale up. That's the hard thing. I'm basically running like a small department across all of STEM, because I have people in all these different disciplines. I have to understand the different advising and so forth. And I think they're just kind of like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's basically prove it. And so that's going to take time. I'm not the only one doing this. Like a couple months ago, the White House, there's main wing in their federal government is called the Office, OSTP, the Office of Science and Technology Policy. They convened a listening session at the White House. There were 6 2-hour webinars where hundreds of people showed up, and then you got 2 minutes to make your pitch about, they're trying to collect, they do like every decade they do a report from the nation saying, what should we do about this? And you just, the takeaway I got was there's so many people trying to do so many of the same similar kind of things, but it's all kind of piecemeal. And I don't mean that in a bad way. There's lots of Dans out there trying to like they feel a passion for this, whatever, and they're doing, maybe there's some really big groups that are doing it across some institutions in one particular approach, or they're just in their department, or they're just doing their own thing, but they're passionate about it. They're all saying the same, all the challenges I said, all the solutions I said, they're all saying the same thing. And National Science Foundation and the federal government, they've been giving out billions of dollars a year in STEM education and workforce development grants for like 30 years. The things I'm saying is the same problems for 30 years. We are increasing the number of people that get degrees, but it's like with the same failure rate, we're just getting more people in the system and accepting the failure rate, so we have more people going out. But they're asking for solutions that are sustainable, transferable, that you can, like, will it work, and will it work in different frameworks? The one thing I feel very excited about is this training class we came up with. I had this epiphany that the faculty that are running these classes are among the most research active faculty on campus. Like Travis Fields, that has the drones, he just got a $7 million grant from the Air Force, I think. They have tons of money. They have no time, no capacity, no incentive to spend time doing that. And so the model I'm doing is to try to really facilitate it. So we build a framework, we have templates, I hire grad students, I'm putting grad students through 8 of them this semester through professional development that help them build the course content, the standards for competency assessment, and basically only ask for the professor's expertise when it comes to, like, okay, what skills? And then now the grad student builds up the tutorial. Okay, now what would be a good test of this skill? So we're really trying to respect the faculty's time, because they're at the cutting edge of research. And if we have more students getting, even in training in their lab, it's going to be good. Maybe they go into that lab, or they go into industry, or they leave here with a career and they go into. So that I think is unique, and I'm going to go talk to the DoD, DOE, Department of Energy, Department of Defense, and NSF about these models and see if there's more grants we could apply for, and even try to go kind of larger scale. It's a mission. It's trying to make one step at a time.
Can I follow up, Dan, just quickly on that? You said there are many people who are engaged in similar activities.
Yep.
Do you have a professional society where you can
Oh, that's
gather
good.
together and have more force to the issue?
Yes. So that's a great question, and I'm pretty bad because, like, basically that's like the people I would like to be spending a lot of time with. I would like to spend all my time doing this, not be bifurcated. There's a couple. One that stands out is the American Association of Colleges and Universities, the AAC&U. They have a wing called Project Kaleidoscope, and they have a national kind of organization. They have conferences, and I did have the good fortune when I was provost fellow, the previous provost Bicklemeyer, she sent me to their STEM Leadership Institution, which was just fantastic. It was like 3 days in Maryland, morning, day, and night, really intense, interactive with about 30 other faculty, and we had mentors that were provosts, deans, basically one of those people for 4 or 5 people. Fantastic. So there are groups doing it, and they're constantly, call to action. They have publications, they have conferences. I feel bad because I've not gone to a single conference. It's just like so busy, and I think people come into this kind of in all different ways. Mine's not the only unique, like I was an astronomer and decided to go this way. There's a lot of that, but some people kind of start there. So the short answer is yes, there is. They're having the same, they're calling for the same things, but it's just an uphill battle, I guess is the way to think about it. To get the buy-in. How do you get buy-in? My model is to facilitate. Help others. If they're at least willing to try, that's awesome. Then make it very simple and go from there. Yeah. Oh, sorry, you had a question then.
I know that students can feel overwhelmed because of finances, family issues, or academic personal stress, which leads them to think, I can't do this. Are there any programs in place to help them figure out how they can navigate those issues and stay in the program?
That's a great question. So that is a very well-known problem. Even before COVID, there's stress being in school, mental health, et cetera, et cetera. We have UMKC, like everywhere, has a very large infrastructure of staff for all kinds of what I would call student support and academic support services. And I would say they're necessary, but insufficient to really change the number significantly. And you got it, some of the reasons. For one, some students from different cultures will see getting extra help as a negative and push away from it. Working, lots of students, especially lower income or students from less affluent areas or families, have to work 20, 30 hours, and so they don't have time. There was a study recently about student attitudes about universities. They don't want all these support things. They just want good teaching in the classroom. They want to come to school and get the most out of the class. So I think it's helpful to have those services, but I don't think it's enough. We have to address what's happening in the classroom, because that's really the front line. Like these support structures, you're basically either trying to convince students to use them in a positive way, or you're basically saying you're at risk, which is negative and creates stigma. You should go get that extra help. And they'll be, why should I have that, right? Or why do I want to do that? I don't have the time for that. If we change what's happening in the classroom, that affects every single student. And if you make what's happening in the classroom very engaging, interactive, they don't just come to class and just tune out. They're actually engaged. They're actively using their brain. It builds a lot of it basically creates a lot of sense of I do belong here, and I can succeed. And you're also role modeling how to collaborate with your colleagues outside of class, which we promote a lot. So, you had a question?
Yes, you're talking about STEM fields.
Yep.
And for those of us who come from social science or humanities fields, couldn't the same general approach be grafted onto
Absolutely.
many of those disciplines as well?
Yeah. I'm married to a social scientist, a geographer, and actually education is a social science. So I'm learning, I guess I'm basically getting a crash course PhD on education. So the short answer is absolutely. I think that everything I'm talking about applies. It doesn't matter STEM. I'm just happen to be in STEM, and there's a lot of money from the federal government for federal funders for STEM education. One thing, in social science, a lot of social science, National Science Foundation considers social science as part of STEM, like psychology, political science, economics. So absolutely, the one thing on your side, so to speak, is that there's studies that show, national studies and surveys of faculty that show like what fraction of faculty in different, those large disciplines, humanities, social sciences, STEM, are adopters of more interactive and effective student-centered teaching practices. You're ahead. STEM is at the bottom. So STEM is, I said late bloomers, I meant to say late adopters. So social sciences are already better, humanities, liberal arts are already better at it, but I still think the same thing applies. The more interactive, the more student-centered, even how we assess. So assessing in a way that's equitable. Now, I used to have the infrequent high-risk exams, midterms and finals. Now I have what are called mastery quizzes, and it's basically there's a mastery quiz every couple of weeks, and that's basically a no-risk first chance for them to assess where they are in their learning. And then I come back with another test that's not the same test, but everything is testing the same things, so they can see where they need to like bone up a little bit, and then they have a second chance. And I don't take the average, I take the highest score. And that really helps a lot, because not all students learn at the same speed. Some are just more methodical and take more time. And it's in the education lingo, it's called formative assessment and summative assessment. You're basically helping them do that. So it's almost like an apprenticeship, except it's still within the semester. Like I always say, if you're going to be an electrician and it takes you 5 years or 1 year to become an electrician, who cares? Once you're done, and you pass the thing, you mastered the competencies, you're an electrician, right? There shouldn't be a stigma that it took longer or less. But we have this very rigid system that just kind of works for one group of people, and the people that have more privilege in their life, that have people that have role models that probably get to go to school and not have to work jobs, and et cetera, et cetera. Love these questions. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dan.
I appreciate it a lot.